In today's fast-paced and informationally overloaded world, science is everywhere. It purports to be the best way, promising answers and a data-driven approach. But what we want to know is, can science deliver on something artistic like magic? After all, magic seems like it's almost the opposite of science. Breaks all of the natural laws, not keeps them. And since it's a performance art, it doesn't exist in the cold and controlled environment of a research lab. There are centuries worth of magic curriculums based on empirical evidence from performers who have worked things out in the trenches. So do we need more than this applied science approach that we've had for so long? In this episode of Erudite Magic, we're going to be examining the latest book from Vanishing Inc., The Psychology of Magic from Lab to Stage. As we get started, you may want to be aware that I am the CFO for Vanishing Inc., so you may want to take what I say with a grain of salt. But as I believe you'll see if you continue watching, I'm going to be completely honest as we search for an answer to our query about the usefulness of science in the context of a magic performance. This book intends to understand some of the psychology that underpins our tricks, and that this will help us find more effective ways of perfecting our tricks. The question is, does magic already have what it needs even without understanding the why? Until very recently, most magicians learned their craft from those who had practical experience. These gurus, which we've covered in other episodes, shared what they learned through a lifetime of performance. With that as the backdrop, enter Alice and Gustav, the co-authors of our book. Both are magicians, but instead of decades of in-the-trenches work, they've traded their close-up pads for lab coats and technical instrumentation to test their theories about why magic works. That's not to say that they haven't performed, but they're certainly not full-time or even part-time professionals. They both work with the Magic Lab, studying the psychology behind magic. And in this book, they want to show us how science can help our magic. So what is the book? At its core, it's essentially a book of theory. You're not going to learn any new tricks. And in fact, as you might expect from the credentials of the co-authors, this is more of a scholarly work written from an academic perspective. The book is approximately 300 pages packaged in a well-designed hardback cover. There are illustrations, and they primarily embellish the conclusions of the book, although a few of them are interactive. This is certainly not a picture book. And the overall tone is black and white, much like a textbook. The stated goal is to help you understand the why behind your magic. In their own analogy, they point out that you can live your entire life driving a car without understanding how the internal combustion engine works. But they claim that if you want to improve the efficiency and speed of your engine, you need to understand the chemistry and physics of how that engine works. Alternatively, if something breaks down, you would need to understand more about that engine in order to fix what's wrong. However, I can safely say that I know next to nothing about my car's engine, and if something does break down, then I will be taking it to a mechanic. In the same manner, if something was wrong with my magic and I wasn't getting the results I wanted, I would solicit the input of others. So, are they right that you should care about the science behind magic and why the psychology of magic works? Since that's their aim, the authors help you understand how the magic engine runs, explaining human anatomy and psychology, testing out hypotheses via controlled conditions in a specially designed lab, revising to clarify any unexpected outcomes, then explaining the details of the tests and the conclusions to the reader. They use some rather technical approaches to test their theories. For example, studying eye movement, where your participants are looking while experiencing different types of misdirection. Then they attempt to draw conclusions from that test about how you can apply that to better present your magic for maximum impact. The book is broken up into different sections, and it's designed so that you can jump in and read in different chapters without having to read the chapters before or after to understand what that section is saying. It works as a format, although there are a lot of details behind each test and the various steps that they took to come to their conclusions. There are a lot of technical definitions and explanations in the book that may require caffeine to power through. It's not all scholarly though. They also share practical tips to apply what they're testing, although I felt that these sections could have been larger and more expanded. But for example, they give you a template for polling your audience to find out what's working in your shows. You can take exactly what they've given you, type it up or copy it out of the book into a larger format, and hand it directly to your audience to improve your show. Even though there are practical conclusions at the end of each section, I felt that they didn't cover a huge amount of ground for the size of the book. In fact, the largest section of the book is spent exploring existing magic theories and poking holes in the empirical documentation that exists. This points to the fact that they're obviously well read as magicians, citing many household names within the magic community and diving into theories proposed by past masters. However, this book may be too dry for many, and only the most scholarly will find it riveting. Me? Well, I can safely say that I had some good takeaways, but nothing that rocked my world. There are interesting conclusions about how the human mind works, and certainly you'll find things that you can use to improve your performances. I was fascinated by their testing and proof that some of the easiest card forces, like the crisscross force and a one-way deck force, are often perceived by the audience as the most fair, proving that your magic doesn't have to be difficult to be considered good. Not only that, they'll give you specific ways they've tested language to frame your performance based on your performing style to achieve maximum impact. And I'll use what I learned about the human eye and how it interacts with your brain as part of my mentalism presentation. Ultimately though, I found the book to be too wordy to be as practical as I'd like. All that said, it seems like their work is still in its infancy, so I plan to stay tuned to hear what conclusions they might be able to draw from some of their studies here in the future. So who do I recommend this book for? If you're looking for a more studious approach to magic, I think there's a lot to like. And if you're an academic type who loves to know the details behind something, you're going to love this. However, for the vast majority of magicians, I think you'll prefer more traditional books of applied theory from names like Tommy Wonder, Eugene Berger, Darwin Ortiz, and Juan Tamariz, to name a few. But I don't think that our approach needs to be either or. Why not see if you appreciate this more data-driven approach? It might resonate with how you can test your own magic or drive conclusions from what you're reading. The book is $50 at retail, and at 300 pages, it feels like a pretty good value for the size of the book and the details that you get. The question will be, how important are those details to you? As the authors point out, I'm open to new information and curious about some of their findings, and maybe you will be too. As I said last week, magic shares a lot of similarities with cooking. And like food, magic has advanced a long way through practical science. Experimenting, building off the work of others while adding your own tweaks, determining what works for you and your audience. You don't need to understand the chemistry to prepare a good dish any more than you need to understand the internal combustion engine to get you and your props from point A to point B. The bottom line is that I'm not completely convinced that you need science to improve your magic. Magicians have been using the scientific approach for a long time, even if the conclusions are not always tested in lab conditions and peer-reviewed. But since this is an art form providing entertainment, does it need to be scientific? I'll leave it up to you to decide, so please comment below with what your thoughts are between the relationship of science and magic. And if you missed the discussion of how magic and cooking are alike, be sure to check out the video here. As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep reading.